6:49 on this Tuesday. And let's turn our attention out of this very strange new study looking at children. And, basically what this study did, it's out of the University of Chicago, comparing about 1,100 children between the ages of 5 and 12 in 6 countries, including Canada, China, Jordan, South Africa, Turkey, and the U.S., looking at the children's tendency to share and to be altruistic and generous, and their religious background. And the results are, strange, let's put it that way. We're joined by Dr. Mike Smalley. He himself is the founder and president of Worldreach Ministries, MikeSmalley.com, also an author of many books, including How to Jumpstart Your Prayer Life. Dr. Smalley, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and you just, I know you just came back to the U.S. from somewhere. Where were you traveling recently?
I just flew back in from Canada last night, so not too far away, but closer to your world than mine.
True, because you travel all over the world, don't you?
We do, yeah. We have a real heavy presence in Africa, Nicaragua. We've worked in about 35 countries through the years.
Now, I mean, the study basically finds, the researchers found that religious children were significantly less likely to share, and often they favored strong punishments for antisocial behavior and interpersonal harm that they witnessed than those that were from non-religious families. Essentially saying that children from religious families are less altruistic is what the University of Chicago study came up with. Well, first of all, what do you think of those kinds of results?
You know, when I first saw the study and I first read the results and just kind of scanned the headlines, it was kind of shocking to me until I looked at the countries that they surveyed: China, communist, atheist; Jordan, Islamic. And you go down the list and look at those, and most of those countries, 80% or more, are predominantly not Judeo-Christian. So the whole giving nature and what they're taught, even in their own religions, is not prevalent. So you have places like China and others that the state, controls everything. And, can anybody name 10 great orphanages or charitable causes that come from those countries? Right. Not usually. Well,
interesting, because they group religious as one group. Christians, Muslims were essentially in a single group. Is that something that you think, if you're going to analyze this, should that be separated?
Oh, it would have to be, yeah. You just look at the percentage of Christians in Jordan it'd be less than half of 1% probably. Look at the percentage of Christians in China. There's lots there, but you can't poll them because they're usually underground and persecuted. So when you separate belief systems, it makes a big difference. And you kind of understand the teaching background. It's just like no one's shocked when people, from rigid belief systems, like even here in America, we have that horrible organization that always protests the funerals. A kid coming up in that's going to be poisoned because that's the teaching they're getting. So when you're not taught generosity, you're not taught giving. And, children, can be indoctrinated, of course, like anybody else. But when they come up in a society that doesn't foster entrepreneurship or capitalism even, then the whole... you got kids in China, as we've been there before, they're barely scraping by in many cases, and so there's no incentive for them to share the excess of what they have because they haven't even been given access.
Right. I should add here, the study found that, quote, religious kids were more likely to favor stronger punishments for the antisocial behavior and interpersonal harm they witnessed in animations, and were harsher in their judgment than non-religious children when it came to assessing the meanness of characters on screen bumping into one another. I guess they're trying to say they were more judgmental in some ways. Is there any, how do you see that connection?
That part of it's not too surprising because when you look at what people are taught in various religions across the world, especially in Islam, which is a very, black-white, kind of thing, and where there's so much oppression, when women can't vote, when in many cases you can't go to school, the daughters, the kids in China, of course, as we all know, but they just changed their one-kid policy, now it's the two-kid policy, but, for decades and decades, if anybody had a girl, they got rid of it because they didn't want their bloodline to stop. So when you have that, when these kind of countries that we just mentioned have a rigid belief system taught privately and publicly, it just lends itself to meanness. It just really does.
So tell me this. I'm talking, by the way, to Dr. Mike Smalley with Worldreach Ministries, founder of Worldreach Ministries. When you go to these different countries, especially where they're impoverished, maybe desperate, and you bring your American sense of what Christianity and religion is, I mean, how are they able to understand it from their backgrounds?
Well, everybody understands in the sense that everyone understands right and wrong because everybody has a conscience. And the basics of, don't steal from people, don't kill, do people right, that's in us from birth. So when you appeal to that, it resonates with everybody. And then everybody knows in their heart, the common sense that everything made has a maker. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about a God that created us, that resonates as well.
And these issues of generosity, do they have a harder time with that?
Some countries do. In the 35 that we've been to, the countries that are most oppressed, the people who live under oppression have a harder time accepting anything being given to them because their self-portrait is so beat down. They just feel like they don't deserve anything. And that's been one of the most shocking things of my travel the last 35 years or so, is that when you talk about hope to people who've never really had any, in your mind, you think they would grab it instantly, but you look at the faces and they're afraid to trust because they've had so much disappointment their whole life. And so sometimes it takes weeks, months, or years for it really to sink in that things can be better because for generation after generation, for many people, it never has been.
Yeah. Is there anything you say that kind of triggers that? Do you find that there's a message that suddenly connects for them? Or?
Well, from my personal perspective, as a Christian minister, the Word of God is powerful, and that's the illustrations that we bring, the stories we bring are all nice, but the real power into the human heart is the power of the Word of God and the message of the gospel. So we just tell them what Christ did for them on the cross, that they can have hope. And for many, it sparks immediately. For some, it takes time, and some, it never does at all.
Yeah, the message of loving your neighbor and basically having a good heart to others, is that is that new for some people?
For some in real repressive places, it is. You've got some, the secret societies like China and places where your neighbors, watch your neighbors and you turn on everybody and you tell on everybody, and those kind of places, yes. But like I was mentioning before, the word conscience, if you break it down, con means with, science means knowledge. All of us have a conscience that knows right and wrong. We really know. If you watch 2-year-old children at daycare, when one of them takes a toy from the other, it'll look up to see if anybody was watching. It knows what it just did was wrong. And it's too young to have been taught that and understand it mentally. So it's a conscience thing. And so when we violate that, everybody of all cultures knows it. And so the message of the gospel, when that comes in, is that, hey, we've all violated this. As Billy Graham famously said many years ago, the heart of our problem is we all have a problem with our heart. And you come in with the gospel and say, from a Christian perspective, Jesus Christ has done something about this, so your heart can be different, and that's where the message begins to take off with a change.
Yeah, Dr. Mike Smalley again. One of his many books, How to Jumpstart Your Prayer Life, and how to jumpstart your prayer life. How do you jumpstart your prayer life?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you for mentioning it. That's a free ebook on our website. People can download anywhere they want around the world. And I wrote that book for people who really, they know they ought to be having some more prayer time with God, but they're just, life's busy, and they just find themselves going weeks and weeks and months and going, man, I'm just not doing my devotions right. And so we put together this little book to help people. It's not a book on how to pray. It's a book on how to have a prayer life.
What does that mean, a prayer life? Like, what is that like?
It means just like a life. If I said, tell me about the life you have with your kids or with your spouse or with your parents. It's not a one-time event, in other words. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a continual lifestyle mentality and approach to God. And so it's not a book on how to say a 1, 2, 3 prayer, but how to consistently every day have a walk with the Lord.
Now, you pray every day yourself?
I do.
Yeah. And what does that involve? What do you do to pray daily?
Prayer is just a fancy word for talking. It's just prayer. Prayer's talking to God, letting Him talk back to you. Sometimes, just like with our friends, we talk for 30 seconds, and sometimes we talk for 4 hours. It just depends on us and them. And there's an incredible promise that we talk about in the book where Jesus said if people would go into a private room and pray, that if any attempt they made to get along with God, it said God would reward them publicly. So private prayer is the seed we plant for the harvest of a public reward.
So tell me this. So when you're praying, are you asking for advice, or are you, I mean, what kinds of things are you doing exactly?
Well, the goal is to make, the Lord your best friend. So it's just like you would talk to any friends. Sometimes I ask my friends for advice. Sometimes we just tell jokes. Sometimes I share a need. Sometimes they share one. Sometimes I just say, how was your day? And it never goes anywhere beyond that. So it's the same with the Lord. There's days you ask for wisdom. There's days you ask for peace. There's days you ask for nothing, and you just say, thanks for all the stuff I've got.
Are there times where you feel you're not getting a response necessarily?
There's never a time I don't feel like I'm being heard. But like with any father-son relationship, and, God being the ultimate father to me, you'll get everything you ask for in 10 seconds. Sometimes, a mosquito takes 24 hours to reproduce. An elephant takes 2 years. And sometimes we're begging God for mosquito answers, and he's trying to give us the elephant answer. So waiting is the proof of trust. So I don't always get answers to my prayers in an instant. Sometimes I don't get them at all, but I know he's listening, and I know ultimately he knows more than me. And so I trust him.
Do you feel like if you weren't doing it daily, you'd be less likely to get a clear line of communication? Like if you just did it when, some people, I guess, only do that when they're desperate and praying for help, that kind of thing.
Well, he only answers when I ask. So he only opens when I knock. So nothing leaves heaven until something leaves the earth. The ball always starts with us, and God counters that. So he responds in proportion to my pursuit.
It's Dr. Mike Smalley. Find him online, MikeSmalley.com. He is the president and founder of Worldreach Ministries. Dr. Smalley, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yep.